Greetings. My name is Robin Calamaio, and I've been asked to do the message at the Connexion this week, which is going to be May 22nd, I believe it is, 2022. Normally, when I'm asked to do the message, I can basically do whatever I want. But this time I was asked to do chapter 42 of the book of Genesis, which is right in the middle of the story of Joseph. So the way I think I want to approach this is to read through that chapter, and I want you to think, what is the main impression that you are picking up from it? Because that's what I did. I just read through the chapter and I wanted to say, what is the main thing, if anything, kind of jumped out at me? So I'd like for you to do the same thing. Now, before we start that, and I'm going to just try to read through the whole chapter, it's pretty long, I need to just get you up to speed of what had happened in Joseph's life. From the time of Adam and Eve up till the time of Abraham, people knew there was God, but they didn't know who he was or really what he wanted. God determined to take Abraham and through him create the nation Israel. And later, Moses came along and the law was given that defined for man much more clearly what God was expecting morally from man. Well, let's back up. As Abraham, he had a son Isaac, and then Jacob. Of course, there were other sons in there, but this is the line that led eventually to Christ. Jacob, his name was changed to Israel, and he had 12 sons, and Joseph was the 11th of the 12. He came late in Jacob or Israel's life, and he was the son of Rachel, whom was one of his wives, and Jacob loved Rachel more than Rachel's sister, and obviously more than the handmaids. And so these two boys were very special to him. That caused a lot of problems for Joseph. When you've got parents that have favorites, it causes many troubles. And in reality, these other 10 brothers for Joseph would actually be half-brothers. But Joseph was given a tunic of many colors from his dad, which made the other boys jealous. And Joseph, he was a little bit, I would call him like a tattletale. But he'd given a bad report to his dad about these 10 older brothers. Dad obviously didn't sit well. Then he had a dream that they were all going to be bound down before him. Well, they hated him even more. And then he had another dream where even his own father and his mother, I don't know how that worked exactly, because Rachel died whenever she had Benjamin, the last of the 12. She died in childbirth. But they were all going to be bound down before him, and that caused even more hatred. Well, there's one time the older brothers are out taking care of the flocks, and Jacob or Israel sent Joseph to go check on him. Well, they said, here he comes, the dreamer, and let's kill him. Let's see what happens with these dreams then. And long story short, they wound up being talked out of killing him by Reuben, threw him into a pit, and then Reuben went somewhere. And then Judah said, let's not kill him, but let's sell him to these Midianites that are coming through. So Joseph wound up being sold to the Midianites, and he wound up going into Egypt. Now, when he's in Egypt, God was with him, and he wound up being a servant in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar turned everything over to him. Potiphar's wife was making passes at him, and he resisted those, and she finally grabbed him one time, and he ran out and left his cloak, and then she accused him of attempted rape. So he wound up being thrown into the king's prison. And that's interesting in itself, because normally you would have a slave like that just killed. And I had the feeling Potiphar may have not completely believed his wife. But Joseph winds up in prison. Well, the Lord was with him there, and he wound up where the prison officials basically turned the prison over to him. And he was taking care of the needs of the people. And there was one time, there were two servants of Pharaoh that were there, a bread maker and a cupbearer. And they both had a dream. Joseph saw they were dejected. He asked them why they were down. They told him the dream. And he interpreted it for them, and one was going to be raised to his position again, the cupbearer, and the bread maker was going to be hung on the gallows, and his flesh was going to be eaten by birds. In 3 days, that's exactly what happened to both of them. Joseph made the appeal to the cupbearer, when you get restored, please remember me. I haven't done anything wrong. Well, the cupbearer just forgot about him. So Joseph winds up in there another 2 years, and then Pharaoh has 2 dreams. And nobody could interpret the dreams. And the cupbearer goes, oh gosh, forgive me this indiscretion, Pharaoh, but there's a Hebrew youth that interpreted dreams for me in the bread maker, and they came to pass. So they called for him, and it says that Joseph, he shaved, and they gave him a new change of clothes, and he appeared. And the first thing he said, well, it's not in me, but God can give you the interpretation. And of course, when he first denied that he'd be able to do it, I'm sure the cupbearer's heart just about sank. Anyway, then he did interpret the dreams, and the dreams were the two different dreams, but it had the same interpretation. There was going to be 7 years of plenty, and then 7 years of famine. And those 7 years of famine was going to consume everything that happened in those years of plenty. So Joseph then tells Pharaoh what he needs to do to get prepared for that. And Pharaoh says, well, wonder who could do that. Hey, how about you? And so Joseph, in a day, winds up being second in command of the entire country, from a dungeon to second in command. So for the next 7 years, he was getting all the grain in the storehouses and orchestrating all that. He was given a wife, and he had 2 children. He named both of the children Hebrews names. The first one, Manasseh, was that God has helped me forget my troubles that I've had and my family. And then the second one, he named Ephraim, and he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So this was another 7 years. So it was at about 30 when he got elevated to be right under Pharaoh. So now 7 years, so he's at least 37 at this point. And then the famine hits, and it's over the entire known world at that point. The people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the earth. So by Joseph doing this, the coffers of Pharaoh just grew. So that brings us to 42. So let's get straight into this now and think what jumps out. Now Jacob, or Israel, the old man, saw that there was grain in Egypt. And Jacob said to his sons, why are you staring at one another? Behold, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us from that place, that we may live and not die. In other words, you grown men, a bunch of bozos, you're just staring at each other. Get up and do something. Go get food for us. And it's in Egypt. Then 10 brothers of Joseph went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob, or Israel, I'm just going to call him Jacob from here on out, did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, I'm afraid that harm may befall him. So the very youngest, he said, I'm not going to let him go. Now Joseph was the ruler over the land in Egypt. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, and see, he was probably 40 at this time, he recognized them, but he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. And he said to them, where have you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them, and he said to them, you are spies. You have come to look out at the undefended parts of our land. But they said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. Yet he said to them, no, but you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. Joseph had an Egyptian name at this time. He would have surely been dressed in Egyptian garb. He would have been clean shaven. I'm pretty sure about that. I don't remember seeing beards on a lot of the Egyptians. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think of the reliefs and things like that, it seems like they're always clean shaven. The Hebrews probably had beards, but they hadn't seen him for 20 years, at least. This is the last thing they expected anyway. But they said, your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. Of course, that would be Joseph. He is no more. And Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you will be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place, unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, that he may get your brother, while you, the rest of you, remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. course, what that means, they're going to die. So he put them all together in prison for 3 days. Now Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, "Do this and live, for I fear God. If you're honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison." See, this is your prison now. And let's just let one be confined. "But as for the rest of you, go, carry grain for the famine, and bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified, and you will not die." And they did so. Then they said to one another, "Truly we are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, yet we would not listen. Therefore this distress has come upon us." And Reuben answered them, saying, "Did I not tell you, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen? Now comes the reckoning for his blood." They did not know, however, that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between them. So Joseph heard what they were saying to each other and understood them, because they were speaking in their Hebrew language. And he turned away from them and wept. But when he returned to them and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So he's still not letting them know who he is. Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to restore every man's money in his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. And thus it was done for them. So they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed from there. So now Simeon is left behind. As one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money. Then he said to his brothers, "My money has been returned, and behold, it is even in my sack." And their hearts sank. And they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man, the lord of the land, spoke harshly with us, and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, 'We're honest men, we're not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan.' And the man said, 'By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, take grain for the famine to your households, and go. But bring your younger brother to me, that I may know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will give your brother to you, and you may trade in the land.' Now it came about, as they were emptying their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were dismayed. And their father Jacob said to them, 'You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and you would take Benjamin. All these things are against me.' Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, 'You may put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you.'" He's talking about Benjamin. But Jacob said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left." In other words, I really only have 2 boys. Now, I'm stretching it a bit there, but "If harm should befall him on the journey you are taking, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow." So that's the whole chapter. Now, is there something that kind of jumped out at you as far as the dynamics of all this? What jumped out at me was the guilty conscience that they had, knowing that God was going to get them at some point for what they had done. 20 years had passed, and yet several of them, maybe all of them, were looking over their shoulder because of what they had done to Joseph. They also deceived their father Jacob because he thought Joseph was dead all these years. Now, I want to read one more point. Now, after they had come back with their food, they were still there for I don't know how long, but they ran out of food again. And this time, you got to go back and get it. And they're saying, "We can't go unless we got Benjamin with us." And Jacob caves into him, but he has them take all kinds of other gifts to try to appease whoever this man is, the lord of this land, which is Joseph. When they come, Joseph sets them up, and he sends them back, and all their money's in there again, but also in Benjamin's sack is the actual cup that Joseph would drink out of. And he made it like they had stolen this from him and hauls them all back. And that's when they know we are undone. Because he says, I'm going to keep Benjamin. And Judah fell before Joseph. And Joseph said to him, what is this deed that you have done? And Judah said, what can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. He doesn't say what the iniquity was. He's referring to what they had done to Joseph. And Joseph knows that's what he's talking about. Behold, we are my Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup has been found, Benjamin. At that point is when Joseph then breaks and he lets his brothers know who he is, and they were just stunned. Again, the point that I got out of this was a guilty conscience and being afraid of God. So I kind of want to take two tracks here. A guilty conscience or being afraid of God, but also there is the fear of God. I want to talk about those, and I hope this will gel together where it makes sense. To have a guilty conscience is not a bad thing. And all of us have done things that we're ashamed of. At least I have. Maybe you haven't, but I sure have. And when we get in trouble or get in tight places, often we can think maybe it's because of what I did that this distress is coming upon me. So in this case, like with Judah, he was the one that initially told the brothers that let's not kill him, let's just sell him. They got 20 pieces of silver for him. And then eventually Judah is the one that completely bows down before Joseph, saying, we're undone. And so the pressure of a guilty conscience, depending on circumstances, can bring a person down to where they finally can be dead honest with what they've done. And they're trapped. There's no rationalizing it anymore. There's no escape from it. And Judah had gotten to that point. The healthy way to deal with it is that these things that we've done, we've sinned against God. That's what he says. Even David at one point with Bathsheba and Uriah the Hittite, which he did horrendous things to both of them. He says, against thee and thee only have I sinned. Our sin is against God. So these things that we've done are against God. And to have a guilty conscience, if it drives us to him, it would be that we have no case before him and we're asking for mercy from the one that we've offended. Now, I'm not saying that Judah did this. I hope he got to that point, and I hope all the brothers got to that point. But forgetting them, as far as we're concerned, that would be the healthy end of a guilty conscience. Now, having said that, he says in Ezekiel, he was talking about the nation Israel, but I think this applies also to Christians. He says, I'll sprinkle clean water on you, and the Word of God is compared to water, and we're washed with the water of the Word. And you will be clean, and I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Well, we all have idols, anything we put between us and God. Moreover, I will give you a new heart and a new spirit within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances. Again, he's talking to Israel there, but isn't that what happens with us being born again? We become a new creation. And so, with this new heart, then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good. And you will loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and your abominations. That's not a bad thing. There have been times I have just hung my head in shame and said, God Almighty, Lord, I have no idea why you would pardon me. And so it's not bad to remember where we've come from, but also to know that we have been forgiven. And I want to talk just a little bit about the fear of God, the fear of the Lord. Gosh, I hope I can make sense of this. One place it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. To fear the Lord It's the starting place of knowledge. Without fear of the Lord, there is no knowledge that we have of Him and His things. It starts by fearing Him. There's another place that says the fear of the Lord is the beginning or the starting place for wisdom. So if we never have fear of God, we're not in His knowledge, we haven't even started, and we're not in His wisdom, we haven't even started. He says the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. Okay, well, you won't depart from evil unless you have knowledge of it being wrong and why it's wrong, and that He considers it evil and that it is evil. And when you do that, that is understanding. Now, many would say we're not to have this fear of God. Well, I can tell you the disciples had it whenever Jesus stilled the storm. It says they feared with great fear. It's the word phobos. It terrified them what He did. There was a fear of the power that Jesus had and exhibited. John, who was around Jesus for 3 years, saw Him resurrected, saw Him ascend into heaven. In the book of Revelation, when he sees Jesus, he falls before Him as a dead man. We're talking about a creator that is so far beyond our comprehension and understanding, and that we are at His mercy, that if you don't have any sense of fear of Him, you haven't really contemplated on who He is and who He says He is, and that He cannot lie. There's been a couple times in particular, I was walking right down the road here, and I was thinking about Him creating everything out of nothing, and I was looking up at a pure blue sky, and it overwhelmed me. And it wasn't who are you, it was what are you? You're outside of time, and you've created this out of nothing, spoken into existence. Another time I was praying, and I was just dozing off. I was on my knees, and I was almost asleep. And it was like I saw one of my thoughts as just a spark going across, just in an outline of myself. And then it kind of made me start to wake up a little bit. And it's like my thoughts then are other sparks going across. And I realized that God knew every one of my thoughts. And then this expansion came out of other people like that, sparks going off in their minds, and God knowing all of their thinking, and it went out to where it's almost like I'm looking down on the world, and it caused me to sink down even further, because it's like, what are you that you know everything? It terrified me. To get a glimpse of who God says He is and what this means, there is a fear of the Lord. Now, as a Christian, I've often said that if I won't obey God because I love Him, then put your fear in me that I'm afraid to go against you, to where I'll obey that way. Whatever it takes to where I will obey you. Preferably out of love, but if that isn't going to do it, fear. So, fear of the Lord, that is the beginning foundation of really everything. And the more mature we are, it would graduate to where we just obey Him because we love and appreciate what He's done for us, and we love Him. And the last thing on this, one of the marks of the unsaved is there is no fear of God before their eyes. So what I've talked about here is basically two rails. A guilty conscience, which is what these men had for what they did to Joseph, but also a fear of God. Now they were afraid of God, kind of looking over their shoulder, He's going to come and get me. Well, God wants us to get beyond that point, let's put it that way, where our guilty conscience, the goal would be to drive us to the point of understanding who we've actually violated, that we've sinned against God, and that we come to Him without excuse for what we've done. So a guilty conscience can be a good thing. Also, the fact that we're sensitive to wrongdoing is also another positive. But He doesn't want us to live in that. If you come to Him, He will remove our sins as far as the east is from the west, but we've got to be honest with Him about what we did and take full responsibility for it, and know that there's nothing we can do to fix it or make up for that, and that we just need forgiveness. That's why the two that went up to the temple to pray, the tax collector wasn't even willing to lift up his eyes to heaven, and he just beat his breast. He's in grief, said, God, have mercy on me, the sinner. Not a sinner like everybody else, the sinner. Forget everybody else. God, have mercy on me, the sinner. Jesus said that man went down to his house justified or right with God, rather than the other one who's talking about how great he was, the Pharisee. So we've got to get to that point, and a guilty conscience can drive us there. In fact, it has to be part of what drives us there. That we know we've done wrong, we know we've done bad things, and we know we can't make up for it. So don't let a guilty conscience be the end of the matter. Let it be the driving force that turns us to God. And the fear of the Lord is something that is healthy as well. It's a funny thing, but we all start out the same. See, when he says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, it's the beginning of wisdom. To depart from evil is understanding. If we want knowledge, wisdom, understanding, we all start out the same. We're all a big fat zero. That's the beauty of Christianity. Nobody has an advantage over anyone else. So let a guilty conscience drive you to God because you've sinned against him, and it's a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And let that be the catalyst to help you call on him. And he says that he takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that we would turn and live. So I think I want to close with that. I hope this has been worth listening to. That's a long passage to go through, and this is a very disjointed kind of a message, I think, without knowing the whole story or going through it all. And I hope that pulling out just these couple of things that were going on with these brothers might be something of value to you. I know it has been for me. So Lord bless you. And like I've said in a lot of my videos, listen to these materials and you will learn great and mighty things that you have not known. And this information always leads to life, and you will indeed live.